Greetings, folks, and welcome to another episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show. I am your host, Mark Hasara, and for over 24 years, I was a KC-135 pilot in the United States Air Force, going all over the world, passing gas for a living. On the Lessons from the Cockpit Show, we debrief some of the most fascinating and intriguing pilots, aircrew members, maintainers, and aviation enthusiasts from all over the world. We want to hear their stories, but more importantly, what did they learn from being in these extreme and extraordinary military, commercial, and even general aviation environments? The purpose of our show is to illustrate how does the aviation world work and to instill critical thinking skills both in the air and on the ground. And some of the stories you're going to hear on the Lessons of the Cockpit Show are being told here for the very first time. Today's one of those days. We're doing general aviation. This episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit Show is brought to you by the book Tanker Pilot, found on Amazon in all four formats. We just had it reprinted, and I have the only copies of the softback version with color pictures. And I'll have a link in the show notes on how you can get a hold of me. All of the money goes to the Airlift Tanker Association. I'm not making any money off of these, folks. Tanker Pilot gives you a behind-the-scenes look at global air refueling operations. All of the planning, all of the execution in major combat like Desert Storm, Kosovo, Afghanistan, and Iraq, and some contingency operations where we had to go out and save some lives. So order the book Tanker Pilot on Amazon or contact me because I've got a lot of them. I will send you a signed copy, softback with color pictures in the book. The ones on Amazon, all the pictures are in black and white. $27 covers the cost of the book and the shipping. On this episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit, I was contacted by a gentleman who lives in Berlin, was a crew chief in the United States Air Force, now writes children's books. He is also a pilot. He does parasailing, hang gliding. So, grab an adult beverage of your choice, sit down, strap in. And let's begin the Lessons from the Cockpit Show with my good friend Eric Z in Berlin, Germany. And Eric Z, how you doing today, Eric?
Howdy, Colonel Hasara. How you doing? I'm doing fine. It was 31 degrees Celsius today.
Ouch.
Yeah.
That's warm, particularly for Germany.
Yeah. And the humidity gets you. The humidity really gets you. So what is that? 87 degrees plus humidity?
Yeah.
Mm,
Guess what? That's almost the same temperature it is here in Utah.
perfect. Yeah.
But hey, it's great to have you on. And you and I have been going back and forth trying to set this up, and finally we've done it. So I'm going to ask you the same question I ask everybody to get us started. Eric, tell us your aviation origin story. How did you fall in love with aviation and when?
Oh, thanks for asking, Colonel. Super simple. Ever since I was a kid, I knew I was going to be in the Air Force or do something with planes. I loved planes, making models and stuff like that since third grade. So it was never a question for me. I was either going to be in the Air Force as an officer or as an aircraft mechanic. And so I was born with it. I just wanted to fly all my life. And so it turned out, I had to get out of the house as soon as possible. So I wasn't going to do college. So I enlisted and became a crew chief 431 doing F-111 fighter bombers. And
Ooh,
yeah. I
beautiful
wasn't I
airplane.
was I was only in the Air Force for 2 years though. That's another story. If I would have stayed on longer, I would have flown with the F-111. I didn't get to though. But yeah, and so that's the overarching story there. And then later on, I went in after the Air Force. I joined McDonnell Douglas, and then I learned hang gliding. And so there's a lot of ways we can go there. But that I got a lot of lessons from the Air Force and a
Mhm.
lot of stories. And it just depends on how much time you got and what do you want to talk about.
Hey, we got plenty of time here. Okay. So,
Yeah.
um, which model of the F-111s and where?
Mountain Home Air Force Base, Idaho. and it was F-111B and the EF-111, the Growler, or the big
The
gray
spark
mean
mark,
one
the
that,
spark
oh,
mark.
yeah, that sucker, man, he could blow out your TVs and blow out all the radars in the neighboring area and pinpoint which ones. The really cool thing about that one is that they can take out all of your systems and you don't know it, right? Your radar shows nothing, but you don't know you're jammed, you know? And so now it's the EF-18, right?
Yeah, the
Or
growlers. Yeah.
yeah, the Growler. Yeah, it took over. But man, that F-111 was cool. I'm sorry I didn't stay in the Air Force longer, man. But I went. Crew chief school is in Texas, and then I come from California, so I wasn't ready for Texas and Idaho. So that's one of my that's one of my lessons when I joined the Air Force. I was 18, and I joined for all the wrong reasons. I wanted to work on aircraft, but I wanted to go to Germany. And what people have to realize is when they join the forces, they don't have a choice. The force sends you where they need you. You don't get to choose where you go. And I don't know how it is for you officers, but for us enlisted, we got a wish list, right? And you get to put, your wish, where do you want to go? And I put Germany, and all my friends put CONUS, continental United States. And everybody that put CONUS got Germany or Europe or Iceland. And everybody that put Germany got CONUS. It's like, holy cow, man. It was exactly the opposite. And did do they do that with officers too? Do you get a wish list?
Yeah, we do. And you know what? The needs of the Air Force. Isn't that's what they always tell us, Eric? The needs of the Air
Yeah.
Force, needs of the Air Force. Okay. And my pilot training class, we had 21 KC-135 assignments, which is a lot. Okay.
Yeah.
And we only had what was it? We only had 26 students that made it through. Okay. And it was needs of the Air Force. And so our motto was tanks for the memories. Okay.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
we all ended up at different bases. Um, all of them in CONUS. I ended up at Pease Air Force Base in Portsmouth, and it was the needs of the Air Force. And it's the same thing for the enlisted too. Okay.
Mhm.
But the F-111 is really, truly an iconic airplane
Oh yeah.
because it's very, very fast down low. It's
Hmm.
swing wing. And you got to see both versions of it, the bombing version of it and
Hmm.
the jamming version of it. So
Yeah.
did you
Yeah.
work on both airframes, or were you an EF guy or an E model guy, F-111 E model guy?
Mostly FB. Because the F doesn't do the bombing runs, right? So
Yeah.
we got to go out to the range and watch them do the bombing runs and stuff like that. And I would have eventually been on the EF team, but like I said, I got out after 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
And did you know something else about the F-111? The Soviets were so scared of it. It's the only aircraft in the SALT treaties. You got all these nuclear missiles and then the F-111. So
I
that thing
forgot
with the
about that.
terrain following radar, go under all the other radars and deliver some nukes. So that was in the SALT treaties.
Mm-hmm. So Pease Air Force Base, Eric, was an FB-111 base. My very first
Ah, yeah.
assignment was being on alert with
Huh.
6 FB-111s, all of them carrying 4 nuclear weapons.
Yeah.
We called it 2.5 megatons of thermal nuclear attitude adjustment.
I read that in your book. I got your audio book. I'm probably going to buy the book too. It's in the front. Yeah.
Yeah.
How did you get Rush Limbaugh to narrate your book?
He was a very dear friend, and I had been a listener for Rush for a very long time. I had gotten turned on to him after the first Gulf War, but I was living in Okinawa, Japan at the time, so you only had the first hour. But he had his TV show too. So this guy's mom that lived in our building, his mother would send him the videotapes of his TV show, and that's how I got started.
Cool.
And so back in 1991, I was listening to him, and I just kept listening to him. And then during the second Gulf War, I said, I'm going to fly an American flag for Rush. I'll send it to him. I don't know if he'll get it, but we'll figure it out. So I sent it to the New York address. And of course, I knew if I sent it FedEx, he'd get it. He got it. And
Cool.
not only did he get it, he called me. and said he got the flag. He called me on the phone and we got to talk for a
Mm.
while and we became friends then. And
Nice.
over the course of a couple of years, um, after I got out of the Air Force, I told him, I said, hey, I want to write a book. I've got all these pictures, which you've seen, and would you do the forward for it? And he says, absolutely. So that's how I got him to do the forward for the book. And
Excellent.
well, the cool thing too about it too, Eric, is he didn't tell me that read the forward for the audiobook. He didn't tell me that. He says, yeah, I wanted it to be a surprise. So when I downloaded the audiobook and I'm thinking to myself, the guy that's reading the book is going to do the forward, and Rush's voice comes on, I go, that clown, he didn't tell me this. And
That's cool.
I emailed him and I said, hey, I just downloaded the audiobook and I hear your voice reading the forward. He goes, yeah, I wanted it to be a surprise. So, great man, became a great friend, and really helped the family out during a terrible trial that we went through with the loss of our son to cancer. And of course, he passed away 2 years ago, or 3 years ago now in
Mm.
February. And man, I miss him, but that's how I got him to do it. So, and
Perfect.
he loved aviation, loved airplanes.
Yeah,
But
me too.
so when you leave the Air Force, you go to McDonnell Douglas.
Just about. Yeah, I got out in 88,
Mm-hmm.
and the Reagan years, the economy was still going good from the Reagan years. Reagan wasn't president, but then I got the job at McDonnell Douglas actually in 1990. So it's
Mm-hmm.
just the tail end of the Reagan years where they were still going good. Bush Senior was president, and so there were still aircraft jobs because that's the big difference between Europe and America. The aircraft industry is up and down, and hire and fire. And in Europe, they're really much more stable. They try to keep their employees.
Mm-hmm.
And anyway, so then I got oh my. In the day I got hired in McDonnell Douglas, they were already starting to talk about layoffs. Oh, the layoffs are coming. The layoffs are coming. I just got here yesterday, and and they were talking about layoffs, and that was some of the best advice I got at the time from my team leader, Kevin. Oh man, I think his name was Kevin Leonard. Anyways, Kevin, tall guy about 27, and I said, "Man, I don't, I don't know if I should buy this hang glider if we're going to get laid off." And he told me, "You got to use your money when you got it. You can't live in fear because they're always talking about layoffs in this company. So you go buy that hang glider." And that was some of the best advice I got, life advice. It's like, use your money when you got it, and you can't live in fear. You got to do it. And holy cow, if he didn't tell me that, I wouldn't have bought it. And then I would have been laying around like a loser because after 3 years, got laid off. So the day I got hired in, they were talking about layoffs, but it took 3 years. So I built the C-17. I installed all of the flight controls in the nose and right behind the nose, the first
Really?
hydraulics, oxygen, the cockpit,
Yeah.
the yoke is a joke, and oxygen systems, hydraulics. I got a lot of good experience in those 3 years, and that really seriously paved the way to get jobs in Europe when I moved to Europe. And but yeah, McDonnell Douglas, man, they were going down, and uh, typical top heavy company. Once they started going down, they started making fake departments, and then all of the cronies got in. So if somebody, because it went by seniority, it was a union shop. So everybody knew when they were going to get canned. And so if they knew a boss, then they made a FOD team. So all of a sudden there's this new FOD team and they all have purple uniforms. Oh, those were the dudes that were going to get canned next week. And new team, huh. And they had more. At one time they were canning. I had a different team leader every week, and they were canning the managers weekly, and then they were so top heavy, and that's why me and you were talking about how could a company like that then, when Boeing took them over, they took over their management, their top managers, which then infected Boeing with their bad whatever mentality and ruined Boeing. It's like, why? When you win, you beat another company, you take their stuff and kick out the leaders. And they did the opposite. I don't know, but I got a lot of stories about McDonnell Douglas too, man. I was installing oxygen tubes, underneath the cockpit seats, the pilot seat. And
Mhm.
oxygen tubes, they got to be sealed. You can't just the oxygen system has to be pure. It's liquid oxygen. That stuff explodes. So I'm there under the floors with my white gloves, and I'm putting in these oxygen tubes, and you're only allowed to have the ends of them open for a couple seconds just to join them to the next tube, right? So I'm here with my white gloves, opening the oxygen tubes, and then boom, a foot comes down, smashes all my stuff. And what the hell are you doing up there? Because we were so late with that aircraft, the P1, the first aircraft, and you had 50 people, 50 people, well, more like 10 in the cockpit at the same time, and the oxygen tubes are running around all there, and there's no floors. So the people have to stand somewhere. So they stood on my oxygen tube. I swear to God, I installed the same tube about 100 times because then I would leave, I would put a protective thing over it, and the next day I'd come in and the night shift had destroyed everything.
Oh,
And
jeez.
I got a protect the part, PTP, a special one made for this area. And oh man, it was made out of nice wood. We had the mock-up people that did just that stuff. And then next day, stolen, gone. So that
Oh,
was our
jeez.
procedure with the oxygen tubes. You have to order at least 10 sets because you're going to install them at least 3 times. Yeah,
Oh, jeez. But Eric, you
yeah,
said you were working on the very first C-17?
correct. I worked on the first 13, if you count full aircraft, then the
Yeah.
first 13. But then, I worked on many more that weren't finished yet. I worked on the final assembly line right before it went out the door.
Uh-huh. But
Yeah,
this
I
is,
never got to fly with the C-17 either. I'm so mad. But anyways, couldn't stay with McDonnell Douglas. They went bankrupt.
yeah. Oh, it's an incredible airplane, man.
Yeah, you been on it?
I have flown on one. Yes.
Yeah,
Uh,
short takeoff and landing, huh?
actually, you know what? We were flying to Europe. We took my 16-year-old son out of school, 15-year-old
Hmm.
son out of high school, and we
Yeah.
homeschooled him in Europe. And we've traveled space available from McGuire Air Force Base into Ramstein on a C-17.
Nice.
And
If it's MSN 15 and below, then I built it. Then I put the cockpit in.
oh, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Because it's got an amazing cockpit with all the displays and everything, the
Well,
heads up displays. I mean, describe the
no
cockpit.
electronics.
Yeah. So describe the cockpit just real quickly because it's an amazing flight deck.
Mm. Yeah. So I installed the yoke and it comes as a modular assembly. You got the seat back, and it's like a frame with the yoke and the pedals all in one unit. And put that in both sides, pilot, co-pilot, and then all of the rigging, all of those cables.
Mhm.
So a C-17 is not fly-by-wire. It's like a hybrid.
Mhm.
It's got a bunch of electronic uh, flight controls and stuff, but it's not fly-by-wire. And so you got all of those cables and pulleys and then I put in all of the hydraulic tubes also with this Raychem CryoFit. The normal one is Deutsche Permaswedge, where you have the two hydraulic tubes and then you swedge them together. But the cool part was the Raychem stuff. When you have to swedge two tubes together, we used liquid nitrogen and a Nicosil sleeve that you had to put over it. And I became a specialist in that. I was the only one that could do it because I read the book. I read the process, the Douglas process standards, and read the book, read the instructions, and then
Yeah.
you
Isn't that
know
amazing?
yeah, so you got to take these things out of liquid nitrogen and then put them on the two tubes perfectly matched up, and then they shrink at room temperature. And boy, that stuff works really good. And yeah, so I did all of the mechanical stuff in the cockpit, but no avionics. So I'm a
Okay.
mechanic, systems mechanic,
Okay.
and yeah,
Uh,
and so I didn't. Then it goes to the next station and out the door, and that's where they put all of the instruments in and all
the
the cool
glass and
stuff.
everything. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So you're
I
doing
was in the
flight controls.
skeleton. I was behind the skin and the bones and the guts of the aircraft. I ran the hydraulic tubes all the way down in the gutters and stuff. Like it has a bilge like a boat, the lower section of it, it's just like a boat. And we used to go down there and big aircraft, man. And there's hiding places on that aircraft. It's pretty crazy.
Places to hide. Well,
Yeah.
and you're right. It's a big airplane, okay? And
Yeah.
uh the flight deck is up, like a story, It's
Yeah.
it's but it's a very spacious cockpit too. So
Mm.
see, that's amazing. A lot of people don't understand, putting in all of those flight control rods and pulleys, all those things, and particularly the tolerances that you have to follow in order to be able to do that is just crazy. And I'm just a dumb
Yeah.
pilot. I didn't realize that, you know.
Yeah. Nah, no self-deprecation here.
Well, I appreciate that. But in the 135, we had what we call it the hell hole, and it was a door right underneath the pilot's seats. Okay. And we had to check the bottle that the hydraulic pressure bottle that actually you would pull this thing and it would cut the door off so that you could
Ooh,
parachute
yeah,
out.
cool.
Okay.
Yeah.
But you could see the pilot and co-pilot's rudder pedal pulleys and cables. You could see the yoke cables and everything like that, because they're right above your head. And
Mm.
of course, the modern airplanes now, they don't have any of that stuff. It's all fly
No,
by
no, no.
wire,
Yeah.
and it's very sensitive too, as I found out a couple months ago flying a KC-46 sim, because I was flying it like a 135,
Yeah. Yeah.
like this, and
You
it
can
would
feel
go.
those cables stretching, can't you?
Yeah. And in the 767 simulator, the KC-46 simulator, I mean, it would react immediately. Okay. And it took me
Mm.
a bit to kind of calm myself down, So, McDonnell Douglas, obviously, is like you said, kind of folds up. So where do you go from there?
Then I went to, this is what makes me laugh all the time is how Europeans say, "Oh, the American system sucks. You gotta pay for college." Well, not if you're smart. If you're smart, you go in the Army in the ROTC or Air Force ROTC,
Mhm.
and you get the military to pay. But when I got laid off from McDonnell Douglas, um, you get a severance package, and in the package is a bunch of pamphlets and stuff. And there was one from the I don't remember what department it was, but it says go to the unemployment department at 7 in the morning on a Saturday, and we're going to talk about your opportunities. And I did. So again, I read the instructions in my severance package, and I went there, and they said at this I don't know what program it was, but it was the state or the federal said, okay, we're going to retrain you. We're going to pay for all of your college. You just got to retrain in something, you know? And so I did that. And I went and I was already doing my airframe and power plant license. And so I had to switch over to HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. What I didn't know at the time was I didn't have to switch. I could have finished my airframe and power plant license because they don't check what you actually do. You just, in order to get it, you have to tell them. So I could have majored in three things, but instead I said, okay, then I will pivot to HVAC. So I got my state license as an HVAC mechanic, even though I did aircraft mechanics all my life. And yeah, oh, I had 2.5 wonderful years of college. Well, what do you call it? The
Yes.
technical schools are in the junior colleges in
Yeah.
California. So I
Yeah.
went to college at the tech school. I did college units also, philosophy, physics, and stuff. And
Mhm.
while I was getting my airframe and power plant license, pivot air HVAC license. Oh, wonderful, wonderful. And the government paid for every unit of my college. And then and that time, that's when I took up hang gliding. And uh, like I said, at McDonnell Douglas, I bought the hang glider. So then all of a sudden, I had a lot of time to go hang gliding, and that was probably the best thing I ever did. Learning to fly hang gliders out in the desert of California, Saboba by Hemet,
Oh,
where the
yeah.
where the what do you call them? Scientology have their main compound there.
Yes.
And we used to fly over that with our hang gliders, and you could see the people down there. They had a different uniform for every day or every week, and they were in their weirdo uniforms. And we always made a joke, if you don't, because you don't have an engine, a motor in a hang glider, so you got to make it to the LZ. And if you don't make it, you might land in the Scientology compound, and then you'll never be seen again. And there's a really lovely, golf course out there. I don't know if it belongs to the Scientology compound, but yeah, hang gliding. I crashed my hang glider, almost killed myself on that thing. I got what we called intermediate syndrome. Do you have that too?
No, I don't. Maybe I do. I don't know. Explain what it
As
is.
hang glider pilots in my club, we said there's this thing called intermediate syndrome, and that's when you just started to learn because when you jump off a mountain, sometimes there's cliffs even, and we did that in Mexico. But in California, you have a mountain, a little bit of a slope. But even then, man, that separates the men from the boys. A lot of people do all of the training, 30 hours on the training hill, and then they get up to the mountain and they don't do it. They can't make it, So in my hang gliding club, I learned that, and then I had like 70 hours, over a year of training, of flying, 70, 100 hours already, and so then you think you can do it, but I wasn't ready for loops, and I wanted to do a loop in my hang glider. Super dangerous thing to do in hang gliders. And so that's my aviation lessons. Never fly out of the envelope, never do things you haven't been trained for, because what happened was I had done a cross country from Elsinore to Saboba, which is almost 40 miles, and I was so happy.
In a hang glider.
Yeah. Have you heard of the Saboba Shear? So
I have not.
Pilots flying out of Los Angeles know about this. California has this huge ocean next to it, Pacific. And when the cold air comes in, the warm air from the desert goes up and sucks in the cold air, and then the two air masses meet somewhere around Saboba, and then up around what is it? Sure, the LA mountains. What is that called? I forgot what they're called. I'm from California. Forgot what it's called. Sherwood, Chino. Those the mountain range of Ventura. Yeah.
Shoot, so I grew up down there, and I still can't remember. Anyway.
Yeah. When those two air masses meet, the warm and the cold ones, they go up. They hit each other and they go up. Actually, the cold air comes in and hits the warm air and goes up. And then it forms a line of rising air from the LA mountains to Saboba to almost to Nevada. Not quite. I'm exaggerating. So as a hang glider pilot, you're outside in the air. And it's not like a thermal where you got to core it. When you're in Elsinore, you got to time it. You have to look behind you to look when to launch. And then all of a sudden the wind will start blowing down behind you, and then you got to go before it, because you can't launch when the wind is blowing down, right? You have to have the wind going up the slope. So you look at the mountains behind you to see when the wind is switchy, and then you take off, because that's when the shear is coming. And then you can feel the different sides, the warm air and the cold air, and you stay in them, and you'll go up. I went up, oh my God, above 10,000 feet, where you have to have oxygen, right? That's the official. Oh man, you can go up to 30,000 feet in a hang glider if you want to die. No, I've been up to 17,000 feet without oxygen. You're not supposed to do it. 12,000, between 10 and 12,000 was the FAA regulation back then. Then you have to have oxygen. And so anyway, the Saboba Shear is just amazing. You can fly in that for miles, and I flew from Elsinore to Hemet to Saboba, and I still had over 8,000 feet altitude to play with. So I said, well, let's have some fun. And so I was going down doing stalls and stuff. And you're not supposed to stall a hang glider. I had a high performance hang glider. And so I was thinking, okay, I had talked to one guy that had done loops, and he says, you got to pull the base tube into your knees and go down really fast and then let it out nice and slow. Do a loop. So what I was doing was I would push out and get a little resistance and get a stall and then boom, go down straight down in a dive and then pull in and then try to do a loop. And then I would chicken out at the top. You see, I was
Mm-hmm.
chickening out. So at one of these chicken out loops, going down and then going up and then coming around, my hang glider went forwards. It's called tumbling, head over heels.
Oh no.
Yeah.
So
And
you're
so
losing
then,
all the lift and everything, aren't you?
right, and you're going straight down like this, and you're falling onto the hang glider and then like that. So
Oh.
then I said, hey, this is the part in the training where you're supposed to throw your parachute. I know some people have said you can get out of a tumble, but I said, no, I'm going to throw my parachute. So I threw my parachute. You have to throw it behind you.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing opens up, it blossoms open, and everything writes. And for a second, there's like a half a second of silence. And you go, oh man, I made it. And then boom, right then and there, the parachute wrapped around my right wing. So now I have a wing with a parachute
Mm-hmm.
wrapped around it at no airspeed. So,
Yeah. No
and
lift.
I'm in the middle of the hang glider. All I can do is pull, and that just makes things worse because it just makes them catch stronger, you know?
Yeah.
So when you have no airspeed on in your right wing and it goes down like this, and then you start diving sideways. And
Oh
then the
no. Oh
yeah,
no.
that was crazy. And then the hang glider starts diving and then does this flattens out and does a spin. So then you're like this, with your cheeks going like that in a centrifuge, and you're just pulling on everything, trying to get your parachute free, and then the parachute would one or two cells would puff open and stop the spin, so it goes poof, boom, and then there you are again with your half second of bliss. But then your wing has a parachute on it, so you start going down like this. So I did about three of these sideways spins, and then opens and stops and spins, and then I just woke up on the ground. At some point, I was just out. I was blacked out. And I woke up on the ground on the Hemet Desert, in a ball, looking at this blood out of my eyes and nose and mouth
Oh
and ears,
no.
and all I remember was trying to look up. And I remember some guy came by and said, "Hey man, stay there. I just called the ambulance." And I said,
Ambulance.
"All right, I'm staying here, man." And when
Oh
the
my
paramedics
gosh.
got there, they looked at my back and nothing broken, so they put me on a gurney, and I got my first helicopter ride in my life, and never got my watch back. But later on, I found out I went through power lines. I took out the power from Hemet for like a day or something. And when we went to get the wreckage of my glider, like 6 months later, you could see the two burn holes in the wing, the plus and minus,
Oh
and that was
no.
only about, I don't know, 1.5 meters away from me. So talk about guardian angel. If I
Oh
would
my
have just
God.
hit 1 meter more, I would have been on the wires. Yeah. So yeah, and then I went to the hospital for 9 days, and oh boy, that was crazy, man. That was they pumped 500 milliliters of blood out of my lungs, and it was Monty Python, man. I got in there from the helicopter, and the doctor, my lips were going blue,
Yeah.
my because my I had a bruised lung. Luckily, just one, and my heart was okay. So the blood was filling up in my lung and then
Yeah.
going into the other lung, and then you die. That's how
Yeah.
that guy died in Private Ryan. He got shot and his lungs filled up with blood. That's when you die slowly, like in the movies. Oh, don't leave me, stay with me, stay. That's what's happening. The
Yeah.
blood's filling up their lungs and they're going away slowly and painlessly.
Yeah.
And so he says, okay, time for a lung tube. And so they sat me on a chair and I'm all doped up with morphine. That was Monty Python. Oh my. I was in Riverside County Hospital, and it's a
Uh-huh.
teaching hospital. And so the doctor was there, and I'm half naked on this chair, and he's showing the other guy how to do it. And I could just feel the pressure, how he cut right below my breast and put a
Yeah.
tube, and then all this blood, 500 milliliters. And I read it later in the
Oh
report, and then it went
geez.
and they kept the canister on the side of my bed. And oh boy, I mean that's a long story. 9 days in the hospital on morphine and stuff. And luckily, I only broke 5 parts of my back, the little wings, the spinous
Yeah.
processes.
Yeah.
So That's a good break actually, because they can heal, and the spine was fine. My right leg was messed up. My spine supposedly went in and out, so my I couldn't use my right leg well.
Oh,
Supposedly I had a
jeez.
crack in my skull, and then but the worst part was the lungs, of course. So
Yeah.
then they put me on the what do you call it? The iron lung, the
Yeah.
intubation,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
couldn't talk. And that was the worst part because then all my relatives came and started crying because it was like soap opera. And if I could have talked, because I was talking the whole time, I told them I don't need that damn tube. I can talk, man. No, no, your lungs need a rest, and they put that tube down my lungs, and then I couldn't talk to anybody. So if I wouldn't have had that, then everybody would have been mad at me and said, "What the heck are you doing trying to get killed?" But because I had that tube and couldn't talk, and soap opera, man. It was doomsday. My family was crying and everything. It was terrible. It was terrible. 9 days, 9 days of that. Yeah.
So you have this terrible accident. How
Yeah.
long was it until you went back up in a hang glider?
I had to walk with a cane for
Uh,
like 3 months because my right leg was numb. I had to
uh-huh.
do all sorts of therapy. It took about a year before I could fly again. And then I didn't have my own hang glider. It really sucked. So I had all of these beginner hang gliders that were too
Yeah.
slow and not trimmed well.
Yeah.
And yeah, of course, my family wasn't too happy about that.
Oh,
But
I'll bet not. Yeah.
well, if you don't do anything stupid, then you won't crash your hang glider. I was trying to do loops that I had never trained before. So never fly out of the envelope and never do stuff you never trained for. It's pretty obvious,
Man,
But
isn't that
you get
true?
intermediate syndrome coming back, circling back. When you get
Yeah.
intermediate syndrome, you think you can do everything. You can't. You're not a professional or expert yet. You're intermediate. And you think you
Uh,
can, but you can't. So never fly out of the envelope and do stuff you're not trained for. And
Isn't that
yeah,
the truth, though,
and
man?
then
Because the two phrases you never want to hear in aviation, watch this and hold my beer. You know,
oh my God, no thanks, no thanks.
no,
And that takes a lot of discipline because you can't just stand up and walk out of the cockpit. You
no.
gotta
Uh-uh.
you
So
you gotta
what was your first flight like
oh,
when
and
you
hang
came
gliding.
back? What was your first flight like when you came back from being away for a year because of this crash?
It
What
was
was going
terrible
through your
because
head when you're like,
yeah,
okay, this is my first flight back from a terrible accident? What were you
nah,
thinking?
it wasn't that bad. It was just the problem was that I had somebody else's hang glider that was just some trasher that
Yeah.
nobody used anymore, and so it didn't fly very well. So I couldn't catch any thermals. So when I did that, I'll never forget that flight too. My first flight back, it was we call it a sled ride because you're on the mountain and oh man, where was I? I don't remember. Lake Matthews maybe. I don't know. And mm, uh, you just go down like a sled, yeah.
Uh-huh.
And the wing was trimmed so bad it wasn't for my weight or anything. So I had a sled ride, which I had to fight to make it to the LZ. I didn't even make it to the LZ. The thing sunk like a rock. So I don't know if you can call it a flight. So after you've been flying hang gliders and you did your first flight off of a cliff, it's like riding a bike. Then
Yeah.
it can still be scary, of course,
Yeah.
but just having the crash isn't going to scare you because it wasn't unexpected. I was doing maneuvers, so it wasn't like the hang glider surprised me. You know, uh, I had plenty of good flights afterwards too. I got a really good aircraft, hang glider when I moved to Europe. One that the female hang gliding champion used it. It was a Moyes K2 with Red
Uh-huh.
Bull on the underwing and stuff,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really, really cool. But I didn't do any loops, but really fast. Those
Yeah.
new hang gliders, man, they're really fast and really cool. I mean, I tell you, when you're out in the wind like that and you can get near the clouds and then you can't come down because the clouds suck so hard, there's so much
Yeah.
lift under a cloud, it can be that you can't get down. In really, really extreme weather, like a thundercloud or something, even sailplanes have a problem getting down. There was a famous crash in Italy many years ago, where three sailplane pilots crashed because the cloud sucked them up. It's a thunderhead. And so we
I
have all
didn't
sorts
even
of
think
FAA
of
rules, of
that.
course. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I
You're
didn't
not
even
allowed to
think of
go, oh
that.
man, don't quote me, 500 meters to the left or right of a cloud and
Yeah.
1,000 feet below the cloud, something like that. And
Yeah.
but cloud suck is one of the number one lifts if you're going to fly sailplanes and hang gliders.
Mhm.
And yeah, I was in Italy, casted. Where was that? In Italy. And was a situation like that. And you could have it to where you can't come down. If you can let go of the bar, right? And the thing will fly itself if you've trimmed it right. And and you won't come down. I mean, I think my longest flight is 5 hours, and after that it gets uncomfortable. And yeah, so
5 hours. That's amazing. But you know
yeah.
what? You said something just a second ago that I didn't even think of, because obviously in big airplanes, we have to trim the airplane, the rudder, the
Mhm.
ailerons, the elevator, all that kind of stuff. But you have to do the same thing because it's an airfoil.
Correct.
Talk about
Correct.
that for just a few moments, okay? Because again, that's something I didn't realize, Eric, is
Mhm.
you still have to
Mhm.
trim the parachute.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So the problem with hang gliders is you can only trim it on the ground, right? So you're hanging from the center of gravity. But, you can put your what do we call it? I don't remember. Your hang point a little bit ahead or a little
Hmm.
bit behind. And a little bit ahead is usually better, right?
Okay.
You never want to be tail heavy. That sucks. And I
Okay.
also fly model aircraft. Tail heavy really sucks. You get really
Yeah.
squirrely. Same thing with hang
Yeah.
gliders. You always want to be trimmed a little bit nose heavy. And uh, the problem is you have to go fly the aircraft, and then you let your hands off, and then you see which way the base tube moves.
Uh-huh.
And if you're in really good air, smooth air, and man, that thing will fly straight as an arrow, and that base tube will just stay right there. And you have a vario, and in a
Yeah.
vario that we have ones that beep because you usually don't want to look at stuff, and
Hmm.
so it's beeping when you go up, and then they're all different. Some just go beep 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 beep, and some go brrr when you go down, and some do both, and so yeah. Uh, the problem is then you have to land and say, okay, that flight was too tail heavy or not, and then you have to adjust your hang strap, and then okay, put it
Okay.
an inch forward, of
Yeah.
the center of gravity, which is almost
Hmm.
always exactly at that point where the trapeze comes up into the
Yes.
keel beam,
Yes.
and
Yes.
you know, and yeah, so usually it's not that bad. Usually the manufacturer has a
Mhm.
point there, and it's the nominal setting, which is good for most people.
Yeah.
But uh, yeah, but like I said, on my first flight back afterwards, I had this trasher hang glider. Nobody knew where the hang point was, and so I put it in the nominal, and that was
Yeah.
that was way too far back. I didn't know, and so I had a terrible flight. And yeah, trim with flying wings, also model flying wings is
Yeah.
super critical. And so the best thing is when the manufacturer tells you within millimeters where that CG is,
Yeah.
and then yeah. And same thing with big airlines, right? You want it trimmed so that
Oh
you
yeah.
don't have too
Yeah.
much drag,
Well, and you know what? We moved it and I'm just talking the KC-135.
Mhm.
We would move it depending on what phase of flight we were in. So if we had a long way to go, uh, like say over an hour to an air refueling area, we would
Mhm.
trim the airplane so that it was slightly nose up. Okay.
Mhm.
And obviously the problem with that is we're carrying a lot of freaking gas. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
And we actually had a checklist page that showed you this is how you burn the fuel to maintain a better center of gravity for longer range flights. Okay. But once we were in the air refueling area and doing that part of the mission, all that went out the window. All right. Because you're draining fuel into the aft body tank and the forward body tank. And the one thing that you always wanted to do is the trim meter. There's a trim
Mhm.
meter right next to the co-pilot's leg. And it's got this little piece of metal that says here it is. Okay. And of course it's got 0 and then, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and so forth. All right. And the thing that we tried to do was when we were refueling is I had, when I was a co-pilot, a bunch of aircraft commanders say, I don't want to see that trim meter budge. I don't want to see that thing move. And we had this like algebraic formula in our heads that we would adjust the stuff, okay, and drain and pump and drain and every once in a while you'd have to stop draining because you got too much from the center wing tank into the forward body tank, and you'd see the trim wheel start to move, okay, and my aircraft commander might start to say, I saw it move, and but again, my biggest offload is into a B-52, 103,500 pounds.
Ooh.
And
nice.
In order to do that, you're draining gas and you're pumping the gas and you're trying to run this formula in your head to make sure that the CG stays where it's at and slightly nose up because that's more fuel efficient. But when you have a big offload like that, you just don't want to see the trim meter move. You don't want to see the trim budge. All right. And
isn't that why Boeing made the MCAS system for tankers to automatically trim?
They may have, we didn't have that in the 135. They may have that in the KC-46 because the KC-46 is all automatic.
Yeah.
It's all automatic. And so it senses when you're connected and it does the stuff, the offload pretty automatic. Okay. And that's one of the things that these guys were telling me about in this unit was we wish there was a manual override to it. Because every once in a while it'll pump more, pump less, not pump enough, all those kinds of things. And of course, in the 135, it was all done manually. We didn't have an automatic system. All right.
Yeah.
And that's one of this unit told me, some of the pilots were telling me, I wish it wasn't so automatic and that we could override it, but
yeah.
Such is life.
Yeah, that's a good question. How much automatic is good? Like I said, the MCAS system was the cause of several crashes for Boeing, and too much automatic, I guess, in that case.
Well, and you know what? Automatic is good if it's taking a workload off the pilots. That's a good thing, okay? But give me a switch where I can go boink and go manual and do it myself.
Yeah.
Because you'd never know what the situation is where you have airplanes that come up to you. I had an F-16 that came up to me once that had 800 pounds of fuel. And the F-16 burns, I think if I remember right, 125 pounds a minute. So he had like 6 minutes of fuel left in his tanks before he flamed out. And we're 40 miles inside Iraqi airspace.
Oh,
all right.
Yeah.
So that's one of those times where you're glad that you have the manual system and you're not waiting for the system to go, come on. Okay. Because one of these guys told me they had an F-22 that was doing a mission and it was really time critical. And the automatic system wasn't keeping up with the offload. And the pilot's like going, I gotta go, but he didn't have his gas. And so that's why you always build a manual override switch, and he told me too, this one pilot told me also the same thing. He says there's a couple manual override switches I wish we had in the airplane. And one of them, the very first one he said was a fuel system. And of course, the two F-22s are flying missions over Syria. And there's all this stuff going on and they're trying to get their gas. All right. If they had been on a 135, it'd have been completely different because this system's not automatic. They would have pumped all the gas into them. They got out their gas and off they went.
Yeah.
But the system started slowing its offload down when it should have been speeding it up. So that was one of the crazy things that I learned.
That's when you got to reach back on the circuit breaker board and pull those circuit breakers, right?
Shh, don't tell people that. Don't tell people that.
Yeah, but now Boeing had to do that with their MCAS because they had to, it's part of the training now at the MCAS to turn it off, which circuit breakers, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because most of the American pilots knew that, but the other guys, Lion Air, didn't,
Yeah.
and so they didn't know what was going on.
Yeah.
That MC, huh?
There's something very fascinating about what you just said too, that one of my good friends was a 737 instructor. And he said, you know what, Mark, all I had to do is go stab trim switch to cutout. And the stabilizer stab trim switch to cutout. Okay.
Yep, because
so
the MCAS does the horizontal
exactly.
stab, the THS.
Exactly. Okay. And if you go stab trim switch to cutout, it cuts out the electrical quote unquote smart stuff. All right. And you do it manually. All right.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And
yep.
It's interesting, Eric, that switch is in the same place in every Boeing airplane.
Is it in the back on the board?
No, it's right here on the pedestal. Right behind the throttles. Right behind the throttles. Okay. And I've been in a lot of Boeing airplanes, and they've told me the stab trim switch is, because if you have runaway stabilizer trim,
it'd kill you.
It could kill you. Exactly. Okay. Because it just goes, you know, and you hit that stab trim switch to cutout as fast as you can. But in order to trim the airplane, you have to kind of go into a negative kind of G like this, because you can't move the wheel manually. There's so much pressure on it flying through the air at, so many knots that you can't move it. And so you have to do this, you have to kind of do this bunt maneuver and sit there and go manually with the handle. All right. And I've been hit by that handle too, where I've had it out and it's whacked me in the knee. Okay. All right. And
wait, you got a handle on the wheel of the trim?
So the trim wheel is sitting there. It's on the co-pilot side. And in case you take the electronic trim off so that no longer the switches on the yoke move, the trim, you have to do it manually. And it has this little handle. So you have the wheel, like this.
Yeah. And then one of those handles
pops out like this. Okay. And it just, it just folds out. All right. If you forget to put that thing down, it's going to whack you in the knee, and it hurts.
I bet
it hurts. Okay. I've been whacked in the knee a couple of times by that stupid thing, And of course, the aircraft commander, he's sitting there pimping you every once in a while. He sees that thing out and he'll go boop, boop with the trim, and, and it comes back and smacks you, and you're like, ow, and the aircraft commander instructors over there laughing at you because you left that little handle out. But there's a little handle on it so that you can crank it. Right.
Yeah.
But what I heard about the situation you're talking about with Lion Air and the other one was that the stab trim had gone so far that they couldn't manually trim it out. It would take like Hulk Hogan to be able to move the thing. Okay. And they couldn't do it. They couldn't do it.
And it's crazy that Boeing didn't think about that, but because they found that out just after the crash through NTSB and all the CVR readings and stuff, the pilots were trying, but it was locked out. It's like, big surprise. Shouldn't be a surprise. But what bothers me about that crash the most is that they made the first ones, they broke the cardinal rule of redundancy. The MCAS was getting its signals from one AOA sensor, not all three. So and now all the new Maxes gets signals from two, maybe all three sensors. But if you have three AOA sensors, and that's like the cardinal rule of aircraft engineering is redundancy, why didn't they use it?
Yeah, you're right.
That one really bothers me.
If you've got three, use them, for crying out loud. Okay.
That's the point.
Okay. So here's the primary. If the primary goes out, here's the secondary. And then if that one goes out, those two, then you've got a tertiary too, or better yet, have all three feeding it at the same time.
Right.
And if one goes bonkers, okay, well, now you throw that one out,
Exactly.
Crazy.
Yeah.
But, like I said, in the 135, it was all manual. All right. And we had a emergency procedure, a bold face procedure, we called it, where you had runaway stab trim. And so, and every check ride in this, you did this, of course, in the simulator, because you'd never want to do this in the airplane.
Yeah.
You know, the stab trim wheel would just start spinning. Zzz, like you put a trim input at takeoff, when you bring the gear up, you're trimming the airplane, and all of a sudden that thing just goes, zzz, it just starts spinning. You go stab trim switch to cut out. All right. And then you manually have to crank it. All right. Or I think there was one other thing that you could do too, is you could put the autopilot on, because the autopilot and the electrical trim switches were separate, and it would actually trim that way too. Okay.
Hmm.
And, but man, I remember once cranking on that wheel. Oh my gosh, man. And I was just sweating. All right. I was just sweating like
Yeah.
crazy,
Yeah.
trying to move that wheel and everything. And like I said, every once in a while, we'd have to do this kind of like, shallow bunt maneuver and put like a half G on the airplane to make that thing move. And
Yeah, that was
crazy.
the same thing with Alaska Airlines and Lion Air. The THS was trimmed all the way, and they couldn't. You can't then pull the nose up if they
No,
pull nose down. You got
no.
that huge THS trimmed.
Yeah.
With Alaska Air,
Yeah.
the spindle came off or
Yeah.
something. It was crazy.
Yeah. It's
No
crazy.
chance.
No. So, back to you, kind of your work history, you leave
Yeah.
McDonnell Douglas, and then, where do you end up from there? Because
Oh,
you're working
like I
in
said, I
Europe
got
now.
those.
You're working in
Yeah,
Europe now,
like I said, I
right?
got to, what? Sorry?
I said, you're working in Europe now. Is that when you moved over to Europe?
Yes. And but ho, I didn't get a job in a nice company at first. I was Mr. Unemployed. I went to the unemployed office. So I was in college getting those 2.5, 3 free years.
Uh-huh.
Um, because my hang glider crash was right in the middle of college. So I
Oh,
had one
oh,
year and then I missed 1 or 2 semesters because of the crash. And
yeah.
then I had another year. So it was kind of 2.5 years in college.
Mhm.
And I got a student permit to go work in Europe through the college, a exchange program. And that
Oh,
gave me the ability to go over there and work. And that was the main thing. And so yeah, so the funny thing is my dad is German. I'm half German. He was born here. I was born in California. And I moved back to Europe. What do you call that? Ex-immigrating or re-immigrating or something?
I'm not sure.
Yeah. So, but we had a bet. He said, "Oh, you can't make it for more than 1 year. You'll hate the weather." And I had a ticket to the ticket back. What do you call it? Return ticket.
Yeah.
And I had um, the work permit was only for 6 months, but you might be able to extend it. So I went to Europe and said, "Oh, I'm moving to Europe, man. I've been wanting to do this forever." And I got laid off of McDonnell Douglas. I did the 2 years for free, thanks to the
Yeah.
United States government or
Yeah.
California. And then sold my van for $2,000, my Dodge van. I had $2,000 in my pocket. I went over to Hamburg, Germany, had some
Mhm.
friends that I met in California. They got me a room, a
Yeah.
little room, and really cheap room in a place. So I had some planning going on. I didn't go over there like a
Yeah.
hobo. I had some friends, no job though. So it, I went to the Arbeitsamt, the unemployment department, and went through all of their jobs and stuff.
Yeah.
And I was unfortunately falsely um, told not to take temp jobs because uh, you want a permanent job,
Mhm.
because there was all sorts of temp jobs at all of the airlines here. And I didn't take them at first, And so I got a real job at a machine fabric as a machinist, but
Mhm.
not even that, but like a machinist helper, because I could weld and do rivet and do all
Yeah.
of this
Yeah.
stuff. And oh my, and my first boss was ex Hitler Youth. His one eye was all messed up because he was 8 years old in 1942, and he never did anything. He ran the shooting range for some soldiers, right? So when they shot the target, he would put the white disc up. But he got a shrapnel in his head, so his eye was sticking out a little bit.
Oh, gee.
And But boy, that was an experience because that was old school. And so my job was banging brass electrodes to make them straight on a true table. And then they went in these
Mhm.
huge ultrasonic plastic welding machines. Sounds cool, huh?
Wow.
Yeah. So, anyways, the point is, I went to Europe, went to the unemployment department, and got an old schmuck job that anybody could have done. And then unfortunately, that company went broke. They couldn't handle the competition with Japan. And so then I said,
Um,
screw it. I'm going to get a temp job at one of the big airlines or something. So I did.
yeah.
And then that job became a permanent job. And now I went from aircraft mechanic to a project manager and in a huge company. And oh my God, have you ever seen that comic book Dilbert?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Famous,
that
famous.
that I'm living that life, man. All big companies, all bureaucracies are Dilbert, man. It's crazy. Yeah. But
That guy
anyway,
knew what he was talking about. That guy knew what he was talking about, doesn't he?
oh boy, yeah, yeah.
The
So
creator of it.
I went to Europe in 1995, and then I still went flying hang gliders. I flew in Castelluccio, Italy, where
Uh-huh.
Il Duce had a hotel. So we're in Umbrian, in the middle of Italy, right?
Uh-huh.
And there's a hotel on the top
Yeah.
of these mountains. It's so perfect for sailplanes and hang gliders because you've got these three mountains in the direct in the middle of Italy. So whichever way the wind blows, you can choose a mountain for the perfect launch into the wind.
Oh,
And at the top
wow.
of one of those mountains is Il Duce's hotel. So it
Uh-huh.
was Il Duce's it was his summer house, and they made a hotel out of it. And that's where I went very close to some clouds. And I think I flew there for 5 hours, and it was really hard to come down. And there was a thunderhead developing way off, and everybody got mad because from the ground it looks like I was going into the cloud, but I wasn't near the cloud. I was thousands of feet away from it. But you know how the perspective messes with your
Yes.
your eyes
Yeah.
and your
Yeah.
brain. That was a huge thunderhead miles away, but it looked like I was going in it, but I was miles away from it. But I was getting cloud suck everywhere, and yeah, lovely flying in Italy with my Moyes hang glider. And I went to Sweden. I flew in Sweden. I did a lot of flying in Bremen in Germany,
Hmm.
and unfortunately in the north it's flat, so they got to tow you up. It's not very
Okay.
fun. It's very flat. Hang gliding should be in the mountains as far as I'm concerned.
And you
And
know what, Eric? That's one of the things that people don't realize too, is that you just brought up a really good point. Sometimes you have to get towed.
yeah,
People don't think they think gliders, regular gliders, they're getting towed all the time, but not a hang glider.
yeah,
You
yeah.
just mentioned, I just find that fascinating that,
Yeah.
being towed behind a truck
Hmm.
with what, a 1,500 foot, 2,000 foot wire or whatever it
Something like
is,
that. Yeah. In the desert,
to get you up.
or they have a winch that they use. They've adapted it from the sailplanes. It's a stationary
Uh-huh.
and has a winch with some kind of engine on it, and it pulls you up like a kite. Just like that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't think
Yeah.
of that. Okay.
Yeah. Sailplanes
Interesting.
are towed behind a plane or
Yeah.
with a winch. And the smaller version of that they use for hang gliders and paragliders. And it's really annoying though. I don't like it. You have this weird harness on and you get pulled up. And like all pilots,
Yeah.
that first 10 feet is critical. You
Yeah.
cannot have an accident on launch like the Concorde. That's
Yeah.
death. And with a hang glider, it's the same thing. Hang glider, when you have a really strong winch, you
Hmm.
could get locked out. You can get stuck in a turn and then go into the ground. So then you have to bail
Oh,
out.
oh,
Yeah.
I didn't think of
Yeah. So I
that.
never liked that
Hmm.
what do you call it? Winching or getting
Yeah.
towed up. I wanted to jump off a mountain. Break my
Yeah.
neck the right way. But no, seriously, never had a problem. That was my only crash. Everybody was mad because I had been flying for 3 years and I didn't even have a rough landing. But boy, when I did have a crash, I really did it right.
Yeah. Yeah. So you've been
Yeah.
able to hang glide in all these different countries. Well, and true, that's a big deal over there. Sailplanes, hang gliding, and that kind of stuff is really a big deal in Europe. Not so much. more than it is here. Let me just put it that way, right?
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy to find. Every city has a club. It's like every city in Germany has their own beer and sailplane club, Segelflugverein. And yeah, so and it's
Ooh, I
really
didn't think of
cheap.
that.
So if my son, when he's old enough, he's 9 now, he has to be 14, I think, to learn to
Yeah.
fly. I'm going to put him in a sailplane club because
Oh yeah.
people don't realize what they got here. You can learn to fly for cheap, really cheap. And sailplane flying, I mean, you're doing 100 miles an hour with no engine. It's really awesome.
And some of those sailplanes stay up for a very long time too.
Yeah, the guy here in Lubeck, I'm not too far from Lubeck. I was in a
Hmm.
small school here in Lubeck. And what's the guy's name? Gross. They call him the Eagle, der Adler. He flew from northern Germany, Lubeck, to Biarritz in southern France. And he did not only thermals, but also
Uh-huh.
kind of like I did with the Saboba Shear. He
Yeah.
also rode the wave fronts and stuff like that. And what is that? Oh, way over 1,000 miles from northern Germany to southern France. Yeah, and I think it took
See,
him
people
eight
don't
hours. I'm not
understand that.
sure.
People don't. I know a lot of people are like going, wait a minute, a sailplane for 1,000 miles? Are you kidding me?
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
like a flight in an airliner, okay?
yeah,
That's like going from
yeah,
LA to Salt Lake City, and here you are in a sailplane going that far.
yeah.
And
Awesome, huh?
oh,
No fuel.
well, no, and no fuel, okay? And I had a very good friend of mine that went to our church when I was in high school who was a sailplane pilot and a pretty accomplished one too. And he came one day, again, this is in California, of course. And I
Mhm.
remember him coming home one day because he had told us, he says, I'm gonna set this new record. I'm trying to set this new California record and everything like that. And he was up for like 12 hours
In the sailplane?
in a sailplane, okay?
Yeah, yeah,
In a
yeah,
sailplane. And he
yeah.
used to always tell me, I need to take you up so you can see what this is like. He says, because there's no noise, there's um no ambient noise or anything, no engine noise or anything like that.
No
He says
vibration.
it's no vibe. Yeah, that's it. That's the other thing. No vibration. And he says, Mark, it is one of the most blissful things that you'll ever experience.
You got to go. You got to take him up on that. They're
Well,
they're flying what's called wave lift. So over the Andes in Chile and in
mhm,
the Pyrenees in the mountains in Switzerland, when you get a big landmass going over a mountain, it
yeah,
goes over the mountain. That's one wave, but then it has little waves after
mhm,
that, and you can
yeah,
ride those waves. Now they're breaking most of the records. A lot of the records were set here in Europe, but now they're breaking them all in the Andes, that mountain range in Chile.
mhm.
And a German crew with Airbus, they've got an aircraft. They need oxygen. They go up 20,000 feet routinely
Oh my
every day.
gosh.
Yeah, 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 and they're flying up and down the whole
Yeah,
coast of Chile. I don't know
yeah.
how many thousand miles. I have to look that up. Yeah, I haven't gotten to that point, unfortunately. I didn't get my license yet with the sailplanes. I just
Yeah.
started that after hang gliding. So I got to flying, but I didn't do my first solo in a
Uh-huh.
sailplane yet. So that's my next target.
See, they have sailplane clubs here, but they're on the other side of the mountains from Salt Lake.
Yeah, there's
Well,
not many. In in
there's
Germany,
not
there's one
many.
in every city.
Yeah, there's not many here, but I remember, oh, I guess when I first got here, I was at an air show or something like that, and they had the sailplane, and they had one of their sailplanes out, so you could kind of take a look at it, and everything. And he says, "Yeah, we're trying to find new members. Hey, you flew, you know what flying's like, and come fly
Yeah.
with us, or come be a member of the club or something like that." And I never did that, but yeah, over on the other side of the Wasatch Mountains, on the
Hmm.
Heber side, they have uh folks that do this where they tow them out of this little small airport. It's funny because this little small airport in Heber during the um, Sundance Film Festival, Robert Redford's Sundance Film
Yeah,
Festival,
exactly. Yeah.
there's like billions of dollars of jets just lined up on
Mm.
this place. Okay. And it's got like a 6,000 foot runway. Everybody comes in and flies in there, or they come into Provo. But they have a sailplane club there that
Yeah.
they have a Piper Cub that tows them up
Oh,
and then
okay.
puts them up against the mountains and they fly around and everything like that.
That's
I gotta
awesome.
I gotta try that. you know?
You must. As I was going to say, the winch, the what do you call it? The winch in the ground that pulls the
Yeah.
glider up although I don't like them, they can be fun because that thing
Mhm.
pulls you. It's like a rocket sled, like that. You're pulling 3 Gs. They pull hard. So the
Really? I didn't
launch,
know that.
oh, I'm not
Oh,
sure. Don't quote me on the 3 Gs,
but
but
still,
it's hard.
that's, yeah,
It's hard.
a
And
catapult, a
because
cat shot for a glider.
yeah, because they can pull you up to 400 meters. What's that? 1,200 feet
Yeah.
with a
Oh, yeah.
stationary winch. Yeah. So,
That's
so
freaking
the launch
incredible.
with the stationary winch is really fun, man. It's a rocket launch, and but the Piper Cub is better because they get you higher and they bring
Yeah,
you right exactly to where you want to go.
exactly. And
Right under
drop,
the
yeah,
cloud lift.
exactly. And they drop people off there uh, so you go on the other side of the mountain or, the
Oh,
Wasatch
you
Front,
got to
and
go
you
on a
see a lot of,
sailplane ride. You got to go.
I got to try that. So, hey,
Yeah,
brother, I got to go because my son's coming in. Okay.
excellent. Say hi
But
to him for me.
I will, Eric. This has been so educational for me because this is a form of flying, Eric, that I don't know a lot about.
Hmm.
I really don't. And some of the lessons that you've told us have been fantastic. Okay. But I want to
Great.
continue this conversation. Okay.
We shall.
So um, I'm going to schedule you to come on again, and then we'll talk about your mission with your kids' books and aviation, and we'll talk about books then. Okay. Let's do
It's
that.
been a pleasure, Colonel. Thanks for having me on.
Hey, it's been great, Eric Z, to have you on and have you share your lessons on the Lessons from the Cockpit show.
Yeah, I'm stoked. See you next time for sure.
Okay, folks, I really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Lessons from the Cockpit show. I can't imagine having that kind of an accident and being laid up for that long, but getting right back in the saddle again. And I really thank Eric Z for contacting me a couple months ago, and we finally getting this out. We actually did 2 episodes, so next week episode will be the second half of my discussion with Eric Z. Again, this episode is brought to you by the book Tanker Pilot, Lessons from the Cockpit, found on Amazon or at the link below in the show notes. It is a behind-the-scenes look at global air refueling operations from the strategic, operational, and tactical levels with 32 pictures that were taken during the actual events that are talked about and discussed in the book. Folks, I really appreciate you joining me. I appreciate all of those who have subscribed recently. And please go by and become a member of the All Ranks Club. We will very soon have the 7-inch stickers that I have been talking about in previous shows. They have been printed and they will be on their way here soon. 10 beautiful prints, 7 inches long, that you can put on water bottles, vehicles, all kinds of stuff. I really appreciate all of you coming by. This and previous episodes of the Lessons from the Cockpit show can be found on my YouTube channel at marcusera.com. Thanks again, folks. We'll see you again next week on the Lessons from the Cockpit show.